A strange tension filled the room, accompanied by a tingling sensation in her stomach and a persistent yearning pulsating in her mind. Yes, that was it, a craving for male company, something that could awaken her boldest fantasies. But what could she do when faced with such a situation, with her young nephew sleeping right beside her? Well, if you're bold enough, you choose the most thrilling option. Armed with determination, and perhaps a touch of recklessness, she decided to seek out what she had desired for so long. And where did her gaze fall? Directly on her nephew. There she was, in her room, watching him with a mischievous smile. What was he doing? That was what she intended to find out. A light touch on his shoulder woke him. Opening his eyes, he heard a story about strange sounds outside and a request to check what was happening. In reality, it was merely a pretext to get him out of bed. The plan worked flawlessly. He rose, and she watched him with a playful smile. He slowly got up, making no sound, as if stepping onto forbidden territory, which, in a sense, was true. Quickly leaving the room, he added a dramatic flair to the situation. His eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness, and he headed towards the door, as if searching for someone. He had been woken on the pretext of some strange noises outside, but it was just a trick to get him out of bed. And it worked. Now he was walking down the hallway like a movie hero. His bare feet carefully touched the floor, trying not to make the slightest sound. Each step was a small victory, a triumph over the night's silence. He felt like a movie hero, though in reality, he was just going to see what the hell was going on outside. The nephew returned with a somewhat puzzled expression, reporting that he hadn't found anything unusual. After a short pause, he decided to head to the bathroom. Seizing the moment, she turned on the light in the room and sat on the bed, deep in thought about her plan. Should she do it? Did her nephew want the same thing she did? Leaning back on the bed, she sighed, pondering whether to continue this little adventure or let things take their course. But before a decision was made, a noise came from the bathroom, a strange, barely audible whisper. Quietly getting out of bed, she approached the bathroom door, wondering what her nephew was doing in there. Was he doing something he shouldn't? Hormones raged, and her mind began to wander down dangerous paths, but she tried to maintain composure, assuring herself it was just her imagination. Deciding to give him some privacy, she returned to bed, burrowed under the covers, and tried to focus on something other than the images her mind persistently projected. Several minutes passed, seeming like an eternity, as she wrestled with her thoughts. Then, the sound of the bathroom door opening, and her nephew emerged. She tried to remain calm as he approached the room. "I don't want to sleep anymore," she said with a strained smile, inviting him to stay awake. "Want to keep me company while we have breakfast?" The nephew accepted the offer with a smile, and they headed to the kitchen together. While preparing breakfast, she tried to calm her surging hormones, but the tension mounted, and she felt her heart beating faster than usual. She desperately tried to focus on something other than those thoughts. After breakfast, they sat at the table and chatted about everything that came to mind. She tried to keep the conversation as light as possible, but her hormones were still raging, and every time her nephew smiled at her, she felt a tingling in her stomach that called out to her. There was something she hadn't revealed, something that had kept her awake many nights, making her wonder if it was normal. Her nephew, he was obsessed with her. He always wanted something more, something she couldn't give him. And worst of all, she hadn't felt this kind of intense attention or desire within herself since she was a teenager. She felt his gaze upon her, full of longing. Behind every smile, every kind gesture, there was a hidden meaning. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was just a male thing, but she couldn't help but notice how he looked at her every time they were together. On reflection, perhaps that's why he was so eager to join her that morning. It wasn't for the breakfast, but for the chance to be near her, to be alone for a few moments. As they chatted, his gaze continued to follow her, as if he yearned for something more. She tried to remain calm, but every word that escaped his lips seemed to carry a different meaning. She couldn't shake the feeling that her nephew didn't see her as his aunt, but as something else entirely. Out of respect, she had never acted on anything before. That had been her premise all along, Despite her nephew's appearance, his hints, and his gestures that crossed the line, she had always kept her distance, trying to ignore what was happening. But now, the situation was different. She was at a stage in her life where she craved male company, someone to be by her side, someone to make her feel alive again. And the only person there at that time was her nephew. She desperately tried to suppress the rising attraction,